So we've been doing quite a bit of GameCube stuff on the channel. Of course, I'm working to build a complete GameCube collection over time. It's going to take a while to do, but there was a really cool modification that was brought to my attention by MVG, or Modern Vintage Gamer, and it was going to be going up for sale. He had ended up getting 2 of them through pre-order and asked if I wanted to buy one of them from him because he figured I would get a kick out of it. And once he told me what it was, I was very excited. And let's get this going here. Let's do this. And he went ahead and sent it to me, so I have it now. This is the GCLoader. Now, it went up for sale over on, I think it was Black Dog Technology, the website. And that's actually where I had picked up the DC HDMI. I remember we did a video on getting HDMI straight up out of the Dreamcast from the board itself, not through like the back port or anything. And that is an awesome modification. It's expensive, yes, but for big Dreamcast fans, they would probably find it worth it to get a very clean picture out of that system. So when I heard about the GCLoader, I was really excited because the GCLoader, the idea here is that it installs an SD card slot into the GameCube, and it replaces the disk drive inside. So if you have a GameCube that doesn't read discs, this would replace that disk drive, and all of a sudden you can load your own backups off of the SD card. And since my collection's been growing, I figured it'd be worth checking out, so that way I can load up backups of the games that I have. Any of the games that we test here are copies of the game that I already own, and the idea of having an SD card just installed in a GameCube that has your backups on it, and you don't have to sit there and take your disc out of the case and drop it in, and of course do some wear and tear on the disc. When I get games like Gotcha Force and some other ones like a Skies of Arcadia, and you get more expensive, you definitely, I would say, want to have backups that you play regularly. And of course, the idea of an SD card probably cutting down on load times, I'd assume, as well. It's pretty interesting, and it's always fun to break down the systems and actually install this stuff. So I picked up a GameCube as well, a Platinum GameCube on eBay that doesn't read any games. I also got the Game Boy player because we'll talk a bit about how that works into the equation here. And we're going to install it today and check it out. I'm excited. I guess at that point, with an HDMI connection on the back and an SD card loader, you could call it, I guess, the ultimate GameCube setup at that point. It's exciting stuff. So let's check it out. Make sure you guys like the video if you enjoy this look at the GCLoader. And I'll leave a link down below to the page where you can keep an eye on stock or read more about it. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at the GCLoader and what you get when you buy it. Now, we have 2 different packages in here. We have the card itself, and it comes with a ribbon cable that'll allow us to connect it from the board that we're going to solder to, and then to this guy, which is going to read our SD cards. And then we have a bunch of screws, fittings, and a washer, and that's going to allow us to mount this to where we would normally have our DVD drive on the GameCube. So they pretty much give you everything you need here. The soldering is supposed to be a bit easier. Definitely easier than like the Ultra HDMI or the Dreamcast HDMI that I've done here. So if you're thinking about this and you've kind of come across this and looked at it, it is a bit easier on the soldering aspect, but there is still some that you have to do. So we'll put those to the side, and we're going to go ahead and grab the GameCube now. This GameCube I actually got online. The only thing I really needed to be able to do is turn on. I don't care if it reads games or not necessarily, because we're replacing that entire DVD drive. And I did get the Game Boy player for the bottom, so that obviously we can load up some different Game Boy Advance games on the bottom there. We're going to do that. So we got to rip this guy apart first off so we can get down to the board. Now, I've told you guys several times, we do need a game bit driver. Keep those handy. Make sure you get yourself a set so you have them for a bunch of different systems that do use them. Even game cartridges use them as well. Super Nintendo, the Game Boy games, and then you also see Genesis games. They all use these, so you might as well get a set online. They're on Amazon for cheap. Get a couple drivers like this just to make sure you're set up and good to go on that one. I'll even link a few down below for you guys so you can have them ready to go. We are going to have to get down to the motherboard of this system. It's unfortunately not as easy and quick as some other devices to do this, like the Dreamcast. Couple screws and you can lift that entire thing out and install the SD card. I did that in a video as well. This one we got to go a bit further. Okay, that guy's off now. Fortunately, all of the buttons press really well. Sometimes they'll get kind of gummed up, and you can actually take the time now to clean them. You have like little spacers here you push to knock them out. The eject button is a little more annoying to get to, but you don't have to actually undo any of these screws. You can just pinch those tabs and it'll push out the side. Some warm soapy water for the plastics, and it should be fine after soaking and then getting wiped down a bit. Now, in here, it's also going to be dusty. For the most part, the fan is where a lot of the dust seems to pile up, so keep that in mind. You can go ahead and kind of look at that and clean it up as best you can. You can actually remove the fan, but if you have even like a Q-tip and you just kind of rotate this and just wipe down the fans, that should work as well for you, just to get it semi-clean. Now, I've already done videos where I've taken the GameCube completely apart, so if you have to know a little bit more about how to do that, you can check those ones out. I mostly just want to quickly get to the part of the board where you have to solder. So once you get to this part, you can remove the assembly. We will need this though, because the SD card reader is actually going to go where this guy is now, kind of on the top of this metal cage part. So we will kind of come back to this so we can mount it. But for now, we want to get this board out. It has the heatsink, of course, on top there, which we do have to unscrew these because it actually goes through the board. If you remember, showed this before, where it actually goes through to kind of help keep the board flat and not flex or anything. Okay, so we got the board out. We will need to make a slight modification to this, the metal casing at the bottom, specifically for the cable to go around this board and reach the top, just to make sure we have enough space and it doesn't get crimped or anything. So again, we'll come back to that. But here's our board, and we're actually going to be soldering that cable to the bottom of this guy. So on the bottom of this, we can actually see our connector here. This connector runs up to the DVD drive part here where it reads those mini DVDs, the smaller ones, right? So we have kind of a socket, and then we have a connector here, and that just connects. The idea is that we are going to run that SD card to that connector, and it's set up so that it solders to the bottom right here. So here's our cable, and it actually sits over those pins, and it's set up to line up very well with kind of the ground pins, and we have some plastic guides here as well. But it's basically set up to pretty much just sit on there. So all these pins will go through, and then you actually solder it in. So we can see right there, it's sitting down, and it's ready to be soldered. So it's pretty easy. It even says this side up. It's set up to the point where there's not a lot that can go wrong necessarily. I guess you could burn the cable or melt it and then it wouldn't work. But for the most part, if you have any experience at all in soldering, this should be a pretty straightforward job. So I figure we'll go ahead and just dry brush to get any of the dust off of these pins. It's pretty straightforward too, because I mean the solder looks clean right now. There's really not a lot on the bottom of this board because not much actually falls to it. I have some pretty standard Kingbo flux here. That should work well for soldering. I'm just going to put that on there. I'm going to go over with some leaded solder just to help it out a little bit before I drop that cable down, just to get the flux activated. It hasn't been melted in a long time, obviously, so we're going to start with that. Soldering iron's getting hot now. And you can see we made our first connection right there at the top. Looks really good, nice and shiny, very clean looking. And once you get one of them, you can kind of go to the other side with this guy pushed down with, I have some tweezers here, and we're just going to work to anchor on the edges as best we can, so that it's pretty easy to just get all the middle ones. We don't need to sit here and hold it down necessarily, right? So you can see we have this bottom row completed now, and the idea here is to heat the pin and then touch the pin with solder, and it should flow down and have a really good connection all the way through. Sometimes people will kind of touch the soldering iron with solder and then just go and touch it and hope that's good. Now you want to make sure you have good flux across it just to help out, and then heat the pin, touch it with solder, and then you should get a nice connection. It should be pretty shiny and kind of have like this cone shape to it. So our pins here look very, very solid now. You can see they're very shiny looking. They are very well connected. When I was going through it, I think it'd be very difficult for you to bridge any of these pins. They're so far apart, and for the most part, the solder just flows to it very easily. If you do bridge a point, you can probably just pull the solder away if you have a clean soldering tip. So, all right, let's say I take this, and I mean, I'm at the jam a ton on here to bridge this. See, even then, it's so difficult. Okay, so there we are. We've bridged these 2 points by accident, right? There's too much solder on there. If you have a very clean soldering iron tip here, you should be able to take the solder and just kind of pull it away like that. And because of how far apart these points are, it should jump to your soldering tip and actually just get away from it. A little bit of flux will also help with that. For the most part though, I think this is a pretty easy soldering job to take a shot at just because it's so well laid out. Let's go ahead and clean this guy up with some isopropyl alcohol, 91%. Gonna give it a good scrubbing just to get any of that flux residue away. This flux is not conductive, but I still like it to be very clean and shiny if I can get it that way. And once I scrub this down, I'm gonna go ahead and heat it up a little bit with the rework station just to make sure everything's dry. So with that all cleaned up, ready to go, connections look great. This is gonna wrap around the board and kind of go up top where that DVD drive is. So we do have to make a path for it from the bottom, as it does have kind of this metal bit here, and it will get in the way if we don't trim it up a little bit. So you can see if it sits down here, it's right in this little guy here that gets in the way. So we're actually going to clip that just a bit for clearance. Okay, so now we can see that the cable has much more room to clear and it's not gonna get crimped or pushed down when we start screwing stuff in. So everything looks good there. Now we just have to get it put back together to the point where we can put like the DVD drive cage back on. So we're gonna take apart the caging that has the DVD drive, because we do have to mount where the SD card, the GCLoader, where the SD card's gonna go in, is gonna sit. So it's gonna sit right where that DVD drive part is, and we just gotta unscrew it. So we can see where this is gonna fit, right like this. You get to the SD card this way. I believe there's a 3D mount that you can get, a 3D printed mount, but I don't have that. I probably will look into that in the future, but they did give us kind of our screws and mounts here, and we're just gonna go ahead and mount this guy up. That fits on there so well too. After you get it all connected, you have mounts, so it's not actually touching this metal. It's actually sitting on a couple of just standard mounts there, screw mounts. Then it actually goes through. We have a washer here just because there's a slightly larger opening. And then we have more mounts here. That is on there so well. It fit really, really well together here. I like that a lot. This has to go on top now over here. We should be able to connect it and then put everything together. You know what I just noticed as I'm putting this back together? There's like the plastic screw hole here, like the mount where the screw would go into, and this is actually pushing against it, and it looks like part of the metal caging up here is also going to push against it. So I think I'm actually just gonna go ahead and cut this, just break this part off here, just this plastic screw mount. There we go, no more screw mount. This is actually, will sit a little further down, and this guy can sit right on top there, and there's plenty of room on the side for that guy to go through. Very good. Screws all around. We got to put the fan back on, the lid, and it should look pretty good overall. Very stock until you open that lid. So we can see we wrap the cable around here. It actually plugs into this guy. So we'll just kind of lift the connector. We'll go ahead and plug this guy in, and it just clips down, and it's all hooked up. So one thing, of course, about this big mini DVD drive, there's going to be a lot of empty space, which is one of the reasons I like the idea of having that 3D printed mount inside. So I probably will look into that just to kind of fill up the hollow space, because when I put this lid on, just as an example, so you can see what I'm talking about here, make sure that cable is feeding through correctly. I don't want to smush that guy. But you can see when I do sit this down and we open it, look at how much empty space is in there. You have to reach in to pop that SD card. But yeah, it's completely hollow almost inside. It's kind of funny looking to see that. So yeah, that 3D printed mount for it will probably be good. All right, guys, with that, we're all done. SD card reader inside. Let's go play some GameCube games. So after setting up the SD card with Swiss, you get to this menu here. It's pretty straightforward. There is a file that you just need to rename to boot.iso, and it will load up Swiss immediately once you turn the GameCube on, which is nice because it just goes to this menu where you can have a games folder that I have set up with some of your backups in it. Now, they have also been releasing updates already. In fact, I think this one here dropped 2 days ago. It's now up to 1.0.0. It's still a fairly new product, as you can tell that they just hit that. It was in beta before that, I think at like 0.9 or something. So they are regularly updating it. I believe this last update fixed some stuff with the menu, but also added support for multi-disc games. And I actually have a few on here, but games, of course, that have come with 2 of those little mini DVDs in the case, like Twin Snakes as an example, some of the Splinter Cells, Resident Evil 4, those are now compatible, and it will actually switch between the discs automatically. But this is the Swiss version 0.4 that I have here, and it has the GCLoader to the left. It tells me how much space is used on this SD card. This is a 256 gigabyte SD card, and you can see I still have plenty of space free as I want to load up any of my different backups. Now, of course, the SD cards can be changed out, and as long as I have a boot ISO on here for Swiss, you can pretty much have a couple of SD cards technically set up with different backups. So let's actually go into the games folder here. There is, of course, a bunch of options on the bottom there. If you want to play around real quick, I can show you with Swiss, and you can do all kinds of stuff with the screen. You can play around with different audio settings, has all these network settings as well. I didn't get too into any of that, mostly because I was just looking to, like I said, load some backups, which we can go into games here. And I did load some up here. I specifically didn't load up any Nintendo games because I know they can be a bit weird about that, even though they are just backups of games that I own. And it's their characters and stuff, and I trust me, I've seen it before where they'll get on people for that. So I loaded up some third-party games here we can check out. Some of my favorites like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, 13, which unfortunately 13 doesn't support progressive scan. I'm not sure why. Twin Snakes, Underground 2, Resident Evil 4, and I also loaded up GBI on here, which is the Gameboy Interface. It is a program set up from the homebrew community that actually replaces that Game Boy Player disc, and it actually works quite a bit better. Like, people really like that. So I thought we'd check that out as well, as I do have the Game Boy Player attachment on the bottom of this with a copy of Golden Sun. It is the actual Golden Sun copy, so we're playing off of the Game Boy game itself here. So let's see. We're going to go... Let's do Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 first. Like I said, that's one of my favorite franchises of this time was Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Now, when you actually select it, you have option of cheats. You can play around with the settings, all this stuff before you load it. We're just going to go ahead and boot it up. It tells you 480i, but if I do the basic hold B, because we're playing through HDMI right now through that digital port, it will ask if I want to do progressive scan. Obviously, I do. And then it will switch over to that. And we should be able to jump in and play around with this. Now, the one thing that people are pointing out is that the load time should be faster. I'll be honest, the load times for the GameCube, I don't think were that bad because the DVDs, of course, mini DVDs, so it was at least faster generally than like the Xbox or the PS2. But yes, in theory, this should be faster in terms of load times, and it's quieter because you don't hear the disc being read or anything, so that's nice too. Fan's still kind of loud on the GameCube, but otherwise, yeah. Let's go through here. Bob Burnquist, of course, because that is the correct answer. Go to college. And we can take a look at the load time very quickly here. It's still there. So it's the people. I don't know if people expect it to just be gone. No, it still has to load things in the memory, but it did do it pretty quick. It plays just like it would be, like I said, if I had the game in the system. So this is awesome for collectors who have a large collection and they just want to have everything right there on their GameCube. This is pretty cool. I like this a lot, and I guess I'll finish up this run with Burnquest here, and then we'll move over to some other games and we'll play through progressive scan. Sorry, I'm just playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. I don't know what to tell you. I think, you know what? I'm looking at this. 2 is obviously the GOAT, right? 2 is the one that everyone looks at and they're like, that was it right there. But I still liked 4. Did I like 4 more than 3? That is the question right now. I think 3 was better still. I mean, 2 is, like I said, 2 is it, but I still think 3 was better. This was ridiculous, by the way, because at this point we were like, yeah, we were grinding through logs. You see this? Like, how does that work? You know what? That's why Tony Hawk was so much fun. Oh, I'm gonna crash. That's why Tony Hawk was so much fun. It's because it didn't make sense at all. It was just fun. And yes, we still need another Tony Hawk game that still needs to take place. Not Tony Hawk 5. We don't count Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. That's not real. So let's see. Let's jump into Need for Speed Underground 2, which is, once again, one of my favorites of the time. I mean, Tony Hawk Pro Skater was great, but man, was Need for Speed Underground amazing at the time. Most people remember this for like the soundtrack with the doors and all of that, but I remember playing this so much, and it's really funny because I go back to it now, and some of these games have not aged that great. This is one of them where I turned it on and was like, oh, it really looked like that back then? Yeah, it did, and it was still awesome. I mean, it's designed really to be played technically on like a CRT, and I think it would look better there than playing it on like a 4K monitor like this. But it still definitely looks like it's from the early. There we go. From the early 2000s. Let's see. We'll jump in here, and here's some load time here. I mean, it's still, like I said, it's still there, but I think it's actually pretty good. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. So now we're rolling. Yeah, you can kind of see what I mean. It looks like Need for Speed Underground 2. Yes. There was a mod that I saw that people were playing with. Maybe it was Dolphin, or was it on PC? There were modifications where it made the game look way better. I think the part about Need for Speed Underground 2 I liked the most was definitely like the open world kind of aspect. You'd flash your lights at someone when you're driving by them, and then all of a sudden it would break out into a race, which was really, really cool for like the open world part. But then I remember the drag racing a lot too, and the drag racing was really fun. I don't know. I would love to see Underground 3. I think that'd be awesome. But even if they did a remaster or remake of this one, I would be into that. That would be really, really cool. Or if they ever went back, Microsoft and EA, and did like the Xbox One X enhancements to it, and for the original Xbox game, that would be awesome too. I just really liked Underground. Underground 2 was just so good at the time. Okay, here we go. Let's do a classic. We're gonna do Resident Evil 4. This one's in like a different like file type, but it still seems to work. It just says that there was an unsupported tool with it, but I could still jump in here. Does progressive scan. I just have to hold B when I'm starting it up right after that part, but it loads quick. As you can see, as soon as I pick it, it goes to like a black screen. I can hit yes for progressive, and then it'll just take a minute, kick over to that progressive scan, and then we're in. So I'm sure someone out there will do like a straight up like load time comparison, but here's what we'll do. We won't cut this. We're going to go start right there, and we'll see how long it takes me to get into the actual game, attempting to skip all of the cutscenes. That's something I'm at mash start. We'll see how fast we can get through and get into the game from when I just hit start. Okay, and there we go. We're in the game. I feel like the load times for RE4 weren't that bad anyway. It's been a while since I played on the GameCube, I'll admit. I played on the Switch semi-recently. Of course, we've played it on the PC, the Xbox One. I didn't play it on the PS4. The Wii. I mean, that's pretty quick to go from start menu to this. You guys will let me know if maybe I'm just misremembering. It's been a while since I've played it on the GameCube. Technically, I have my other GameCube I can load it up on, but you guys will have to let me know if that was pretty quick for RE4 to start up. Now he's gonna come running at me with an axe, and I'll just shoot him a couple times and take him out. It is different now. The Wii version is definitely the way to play, right? Because you can, of course, just point with the remote, but this was it back then. So now let's go ahead and check out the Game Boy interface right here, Game Boy Player. And this will allow us, here we go with GBI. This will allow us to play the Game Boy Advance game that I have in there right now, which is Golden Sun. So let's actually change this. We're just going to change this to 480p 60. Let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll just hit start just to load it up. And there we are. Look at that. Loads right up. Looks good too right here, man. It's very bright. Colors look good. Camelot, yes. It is smaller here on the screen, but if I actually go into X, I should be able to, there we go. I can actually blow it up if I want. There you go. I can make it the full screen here. There we go. And here we are with Golden Sun. Look at that. Game Boy interfaces. That's pretty cool. Look, the biggest thing with that Game Boy player, right, is that it is so expensive for the disc, but not necessarily the hardware, the player that goes underneath the GameCube. Sometimes you'll find a GameCube and it just has it attached to it. It's a beautiful thing, right? But that disc is, whenever I find them, they always tend to be scratched. They're missing their case, and it's a shame because we need that to play the Game Boy Advance game. So it is cool that the homebrew community designed a program that would let you play this without that disc, but you do need a way to boot it. pretty cool to see this being a solid way to do that. Let's go ahead and we're just going to light these guys up. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, we're just going to destroy these guys with some psi energy. There we go. And man, I miss Golden Sun. How do we get them to make another Golden Sun? Can we do that soon? Nintendo? Camelot? Can we do that? That'd be awesome. It still looks good, like on the Game Boy Advance. This is on like a larger monitor. It still looks solid. But hey, there you go. I can play it through the Game Boy interface here on my GameCube through SD loading. There we go. Cool. Very, very neat. Of course, it'll work with Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, all of that stuff. And you don't need that very expensive, very fragile disc that gets marked up like crazy on eBay and Amazon anyway. So I have to say, I really like this thing. The GCLoader is actually amazing. Like, it works really well. Everything loaded quickly, and they are updating it as we go along. Just exited beta, it seems, now in version 1.0.0. The install isn't bad, but there is some modification, slight modification to the metal casing inside, and there is soldering. So that's something else you'd have to keep in mind. I don't think it's difficult soldering. I think most people who have at least attempted to solder something would be able to figure it out with the right tools. But again, there are some people who just don't want to take it all apart. I get that. But for the people that do, this is pretty cool. I think it's great if you have a large GameCube collection and you want to load your backups on your GameCube without having to switch them out all the time, or again, take them out of the casing. And if they're more expensive games, I get it. You don't want to have to handle them all the time. Completely understand. Very, very neat. At $80, I think it's actually fair for $80, especially if they continue to update it with firmware and other things. And just from what it allows with the Cube, it's pretty cool. Glad to see the GameCube getting more stuff, though. I really like it. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Very curious what you think. Make sure you like the video on the way out if you enjoyed it. Dislike it if not, and I'll see you guys next time.